Welcome to Spy Satellites, a podcast about Dune Imperium and the people who play it. I'm your host CJ, and this is Rotation 6, where we're talking about the homebrew leaders dreamed up by the community and implemented in Murphy's Law's mod. So join us for a roundtable discussion focusing on cards, combos, atomics, and everything spice. If you like what we do, please give us a like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support us, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/hiddenassets. Supporting us helps us continue to produce quality content and gives you access to some pretty awesome perks, including voting for the upcoming podcast topic, like this one. So tell your friends and let us know how we're doing. We're always trying to improve the quality of our content, and we can't do it without you, the listener. And orbiting around Arrakis with me today are two lovely individuals, the first of which is our Water of Life Open Game Master and currently one undefeated in the Canley, Holyboss.
How's it going, guys?
It's good to have you here, and let's get this going because we got a lot to talk about, right?
What about me?
Oh, I know. I'm getting there. Also returning from the far side of Arrakis is our sedulous mentat, the one, the only BlackShadow.
Feels like the far side of Arrakis. Howdy, it has been. It's been busy here. Moving home is it's a lot of work. I don't encourage you to do it as much as you can, especially in the current climate. But it's gone about as well as it can do. Bed turns up tomorrow, and once things are settled down, we'll start getting on more with the Dune content. But it's been a busy couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has been for me as well. So, but let's get going. So we're going to start here talking about the homebrew leaders and the best ones, the worst ones, and then everything in between. And then we're going to come to some understanding of what you think are the best balanced leaders for the current leader pool. Let's start with the worst leaders, the ones that you feel are at the bottom of the barrel, the ones that maybe not are the worst in general design, but just the ones that are the most Oh, and by the way, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you will have some visual imagery to help you out. If you are listening on the Apple podcast or any other streaming service, we'll do our best to explain what each of these leaders does because they're somewhat complicated. And then if you also want to go in and check out these leaders yourselves, you can also do that with on Murphy's Law's mod by just going into the workshop in TTS and searching for that. Why don't we kick it off? BlackShadow, let's start off. What do you think is probably one of the ones of these leaders that you just didn't click with, that didn't really work for you at all? Ones you wanted to talk about here that are
Got to try and remember it slightly here. I mean, it's been a few weeks now into it. It's been busy. Me and you played, I think, like about a dozen of these characters or so, and I think Holyboss covered more or less the rest. Or we've seen them all at least in some form or another as we've experimented these over the past few weeks. I think a lot of them actually been pretty decent. Obviously, the beauty of Homebrew is obviously you kind of have a bit of a blank slate, and I'm sure if Mr. Denon had managed to find some time to watch any of our Homebrew stuff, I'm sure he's probably seen plenty of stuff that he's familiar with. I'm sure his like drafting sessions or with whoever else working out the leaders is probably pretty similar to this. You just kind of throw stuff to the wall and see what sticks. Obviously, what has and hasn't worked has changed a bit depending on the whoever the expansions are in. Some of these leaders, it should be noted, are designed to work with a specific expansion, which is not something you should try to do, generally speaking, if you can help it in your designing video game stuff, especially with leaders. Having ones you can only do certain expansion specifically isn't ideal, but it is what it is. So I'm trying to get my games back here. It's kind of tricky for me though, because I feel like if I had to pick one, which was a bit of a disappointment, was Feyd-Rautha for me. We had a fan of him, but it's not because I don't think Feyd-Rautha is actually that bad. I think he's okay. In theory, like on the face of it, he looks pretty good actually. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you gain a victory point on your turn, be it from factions, be it from buying spice, anything that's not a combat, basically, you can trash an intrigue in your hand for another one. That's not bad. Being able to cycle intrigues is something that is not easy to do in this game. There's very few ways to do it without being able to actually just use them specifically. That's why the spot on the Talaxu track is very popular. It's why Court Intrigue's pretty cool. But the problem is, it's one of those cards where it's like, it's just a pure punt and a gamble. And it felt like to me, like if you're behind, it's probably not going to save your game, and if you're ahead, it just kind of pushes you further ahead probably. But there's times you're going to have decent intrigues anyway. It's just a complete punt. The other issue we had for Feyd-Rautha as well, his ring's also okay, I guess. A spice for a troop and a trash doesn't sound too bad. It's actually the same ability as the control of the spice cards from Epic mode. It's just literally the straight same
Right.
thing. It's something you do have to base a lot of his game around. He's obviously designed to be a fighter, but it's pretty tricky for him. The other issue as well when I was playing with Feyd-Rautha is that the person to my right was basically just an unstoppable powerhouse in combat, and was basically had won the game by like round 3. So it was when you're to the left of that, it's like if you've got a Tesia that's just like completely crushing the board and you're to the left of them, there's not a lot you can really do sometimes. You just kind of get impacted by it. It's just, what do you do? Because generally, if you're struggling to like contest alliances and that sort of thing, you're forced into combat. And while Feyd-Rautha was like okay, there are people that are just a lot better. Find the spice room is difficult sometimes because obviously they have a lot of leaders in combat with them. It wasn't really the fairest of games for him, but like it's okay. But it's kind of his ring is not good enough to really play specifically around. But it's not quite good enough on its own either. And Favored Air is just gambling basically. And the thing is, you don't like pull an intrigue card like some other people do. You have to trash one first, so you're not even getting value out of that. So,
Right.
you're not even necessarily getting full value.
Yeah. Holyboss, any thoughts on Feyd-Rautha?
Yeah, he's just right. I mean, I think it's kind of hard too because you're playing these leaders with the rest of these homebrewed leaders, and some of them are pretty
Wild.
pretty
OP.
busted. Right? So you can't really. I think if you put this against like standard leaders, you'd probably think a little bit differently.
Yeah, I did comment this at the time as well. I said like the game he was in, I was playing him. It wasn't really a fair game for him really because he was just basically dead on all fronts almost immediately. So that did kind of true. But even like kind of sussing into him, like Favorite Air, it looks a lot better on paper than what I think it actually is. And of course, if you gain the victory point and you don't have any intrigues in hand, well, you get nothing. Favorite Air is completely useless. So
Yeah, there's that as a problem, and there's also if you have good intrigues, it's also a problem. So you need to kind of like amass. You need to amass them early and get like a couple that you don't want, just to be able to like cycle through them, right?
Yeah, and if you start and obviously the thing is, if you start taking points and then not taking the swap, then they know you've got a decent intrigue, and they think they'll probably game heavily, which means they know you're probably not going to have many more in games. So there's a lot of meta issues, but I think as a base point, I think he's fine. But yeah, especially compared to some of the other leaders around, it's pretty bad.
I like the idea of if you gain a point, something else happens to you. That's a cool idea as a passive effect. So I don't want to lose that. Like if this guy's getting retooled by the designer who I'm not sure. I think this might be Max's card. There are a lot of cards, by the way. A lot of these are designed by 2 or 3 people. Agent of Zion was one of the designers of some of these cards, and the other ones were designed by Max and I think one other person who I can't. I don't know off the top of my head, but if you message us, we'll make sure to give you credit. But I like the idea of having something, right? I don't know if this is the right thing. As you said,
I would say even just sorry to interrupt, but yeah, just make it so he just draws an intrigue when he gains a victory point. Simple tweak. I think that would make Favorite Air pretty solid, not overpowered. You're not gonna. It's only on your turn as well, so you're only gonna probably gain like maybe. Get it maybe 5 or 6 times possibly in a game, maybe more depending. And again, like obviously you're rolling luck, but it's the same as the Baron, isn't it? Obviously he's paying for the intrigues and he doesn't know what he's going to get, so it still kind of goes with that vibe. So his ring is fine, but I don't think you can. It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that'd be nice. Just gaining the intrigue.
I agree. Either gaining the intrigue or I even like having a condition, right? If it were to trash an intrigue and get an intrigue plus something else, I think that might even be. I don't know what the something else would be, but I like the idea of having a condition of you need to give up this to get something great. So there's at least like some decision space there.
Yeah.
There's that space on the Tleilaxu board that we kind of talked about, maybe using that as a base for that. We trash an intrigue to draw a card and an intrigue card.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you guys. I think the ring effect is just a little underwhelming, like 1 spice for the thrashing effect is great.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't really feel very Feyd-Rautha to me, you know? The intrigues kind of do. He's a Harkonnen, so obviously treachery is in their nature. I'm not really sure if this is a treacherous fight so much as just like a straight up like effect that's kind of basic, you know, a droop and a discard. So I'd like to see something reworked for his ring too, just something a little bit more Feyd-Rautha-y. And I know this isn't the first version of this leader as well. I think it's been retooled. So, all right. So, Holyboss, you want to toss one out that you think is just needs a little bit more work, or one that didn't do it for you?
Yeah, sure. I think the last one that I played that I was kind of underwhelmed with was Darwi Odrade. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'll read her stuff. Gathering forces, you can acquire 1 Bene Gesserit card for 2 less persuasion, and then her ring is other memory. This card is part of the Bene Gesserit faction. I mean, I like the idea generally of being like the leader that can create the Omega Benny deck.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like this is enough, to be honest. I mean, obviously Atomics makes this super problematic. You can't just like pick this up when you see, long reach or something in the row and actually expect to get it. I know you got it in the game that you played, CJ. We had the early reveal for it, but yeah, it's just there's not enough Benny cards, I think, to have this be viable, and then B, the ring itself is even more specific, right? Because even within the Benny cards, there are what would you guys say, maybe 10, 15 that have like when a Bene Gesserit is in play condition.
It's bad.
I think it's fewer than that. Yeah, I think it's
that?
like 7 maybe. Yeah.
Really?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, there you go, right?
But it's tricky for Darwi. Like it should be noted, like all the games we played were with Ix and Imo expansions, and I think Darwi is somebody who gets affected a lot. If you had Darwi, but she was playing in base game, I actually think she'd be sort of thereabouts. Being able to target like obviously Jessica and Kwisatz and Mahaim a lot more effectively would make her pretty dangerous. And also the thing as well is that as the expansions have gone on, I think the sheer proportion of Bene Gesserit to other cards in the deck has gone down a little bit, especially in Immortality. Immortality didn't really bring in any Bene Gesserit cards, really, if you think about it. So
yeah,
it's just simply less about. So I think that is worth noting that she's probably a little weaker with the expansions. It's also like I like Gathering Force. I actually think is not a terrible idea at all, but obviously it's again because of Immortality and Atomics, it's kind of random what you're going to find. And that is also an issue. It's also the issue as well because obviously some cards are about right, but then like she's able to in theory pick up that if she just like buys a normal card and then in the shadows turns up, she gets it for free, which is completely absurd. A card that is already heavily undercosted and she just gets it free of charge without even knowing it was going to turn up, that sort of thing. I think is an issue. Her ring as well. I think while it's fine. Obviously, the idea is to make her so she snipes the really big juicy cards. Like Mahaim and such, and Jessica, and kind of obviously using her ring to kind of help enable those more. But again, there aren't that many cards that like have enabling. I mean, it's Embedded Agent is one I can think of. Only other one I can think of that's on my head would be like Gene Manipulation.
Long Reach.
So that's the issue. Like other than that, there just isn't really.
Missionaria.
Missionaria, I guess. But there just isn't. There's not enough cards, I think, to make the ring that valuable. And again, you're also gambling. Like you can see what the first 5 cards are. You don't know what the rest of the deck's going to be. So if they just don't turn out, you might just basically have a leader who's almost blank. And
exactly.
One, I think it's okay to have leaders that obviously are more pickable on certain types of boards. Like obviously you'll pick an ECAS, an armored ECAS, more likely if like Shifting Allegiances is out there, or Guild Bankers is out there. Those 3-cost cards you can get there. This is like the real extreme end of that, and I think it's probably a little too far for. You don't want to make leaders so heavily specialized that you just pick them when like it's really good for them, and then you just never touch them. It don't quite fit for me.
I agree. Yeah, I think this one needs probably the most work in a couple of areas. I don't really like the Gathering Forces reveal turn effect of two less persuasion. There are already a lot of things that do that. There's a board space in the base game that does that. I mean, in both games that does it.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah, and the ring is just a non-effect most of the time, which kind of is a bummer. As also thematically, and I'm going to be the theme guy today because I love talking about theme in this game.
Someone's got to be.
Yeah, is that
someone's got to know the Doom Lord.
You would know what we do, so.
No worries. So I mean, the fact that it's like a gathering of all Bene Gesserits doesn't make a lot of sense for the lore, because the Bene Gesserit were notoriously involved in every aspect of Empire, and they weren't all clustered together. In fact, they'd go long times without seeing another Bene Gesserit initiate or whatever. So I like the idea of gathering them all. It just doesn't really work. It also is really easy to deny this effect.
Yeah.
And then again, as you said, it's kind of a blank leader. It's a cool idea. It's a really cool idea, and I'm glad it's here to get us talking about it. But I'd be more interested in seeing a sort of diversification of different tags with this leader, like maybe a leader that had different effects based on different types of tags you played, for instance.
Almost like a mini what's it called? The other Benny card, the infiltrates. Whatever it is called, the Web of Power. That's the one. Obviously, Web of Power gets buffed more depending on like what factions you've hit. So maybe it's like if you graft it with. Then you don't want to go down that part. But yeah, something like that would be also an idea. I also want to make a quick note before we carry on as well. Like we obviously joke slightly about like the thematics, but I think thematics is actually pretty important, and I don't think it should be ignored. This is how your leaders. There's only a few things that you can do with these pieces of card to kind of give them identity. One is obviously the image you provide, and obviously knowing what they are, but what effects they do and the kind of things they do does make a big difference. Why do you think the Beast is the Warlord, the Baron's your intrigue guy, Ilban's your moneymaker, that sort of thing? Like it all plays into kind of that the character, and it all is important, so it should not be ignored.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure how else you would get this if this is what you're going for, trying to get the Benny leader going. I mean, I think the ring is weak enough where you can literally put it in the passive, and it's still not a busted passive. Just say that like you always have a Benny Gesserit card in play.
Yeah.
So to me, that's and I don't even know if that would be. I don't even know if that would be great, but I just think between the two of them, it's just you just don't have enough, and it's too high rolly. I shouldn't say it's too high rolly. It's high variance. And
situational.
The situations where it is good are so slim that it's just not worth the risk, especially with the atomics.
All right, Master Waff. Master Waff is my pick for one of the weirder leaders that I think is a cool idea, but just doesn't work for me. Master Waff has a passive ability called Splice. Is when you gain a specimen, you may acquire a card from the Tleilaxu row. And then his ring ability is called Clandestine Funding, and it gives you a research icon, and if you're at the first DNA marker, you get another specimen, which means then you can acquire a card from the Tleilaxu row. So it's a cool idea. I like how the idea of the ring playing into your passive is working. That's cool. And he just researches, which he does the thing. He's very narrow. There's a couple things that I don't really like about this, and I think that this is something that BlackShadow said, is that this is so specific to Immortality. This could not be played with Ix only and base game or base game. Yeah. So that's one of the main problems I have with it, and I think that those things need to be taken into consideration when designing these, because I'd like to play a leader with anything. I'd like them to work with anything. The research icon on the leader it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So I don't know what to do with this guy. I think that also buying a bunch of Tleilaxu cards is not always great, because you're going to get a specimen like first action maybe, and then you can't use it. So it doesn't do anything, and then you might be able to do it immediately after you've gotten your third specimen. There's also a problem of timing, is that you do these during reveal, and then you gain a card, but you could already do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think that this guy, I like having a Master Waff style character in there because I think that's an unexplored aspect of the leaders right now. Is we don't know very much about the Tleilaxu. Of course, they're kind of secretive and all that stuff, but Master Waff is a very pivotal character later on in the book series, the original 6 series, and so it'd be nice to see him in here somewhere. I just don't know if this is what he should be doing.
I think this falls into the same trap of what we just said on the last card. Like, unfortunately, this is a leader as designed where, if the Talaxu row has like Gola and scientific breakthrough or that sort of thing, those pretty decent 3 or 4 specimen cards, you're gonna pick Master off. And if the Talaxu row has in the tanks, and something else that's not very very highly desirable in the game, then you just don't pick him. And that's no good. There's it when you make someone so specific and so narrow, you're basically forcing them to only be picked when it's really advantageous to do so, because otherwise you just disadvantage yourself for no good reason. Which is kind of, I think, what was the problem that we had with it. I think as well his abilities, again, like the fact his rain plays into his general passive, which is good, and I think that's definitely something you should try and look to do. It's not very remarkable. It's not particularly interesting. Obviously, the idea of Master Wealth is you're getting these specimens, so you can obviously look to chase the second Talaxu point a lot more reliably by just cashing in for beetles, or maybe get some on the side passive troop generation, like maybe some sneaky reclaim forces, get some troops into your garrison so you can send them out unexpectedly. There's some cool stuff that he could do, but it's I don't know. It is a little underwhelming, but I think as a base point, it's fine. But it's a little too narrow, and I think that's just that is the issue.
Yeah. I'd like to see maybe some of these guys, some of the Talaxu, doing something with the Landsrat icon, because they're sort of outcast from the Landsrat, though they have representation, a minor amount of representation. They do show up at the Landsrat, try to make a scene or call out people, things like that. I'd like to see something tweaked to work with that icon. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
No, I was just gonna say probably more of the same. I think being narrow is okay. It's just that at some point it's a little bit. There's some point where it is too narrow, right? Like you'd say, ECAS is relatively narrow in whatever the leaders that we have to actually pick from. When you have with 3 costs out there, he becomes a lot better, but that's fine, right? I think this one's just so specific, and I think the passive honestly is just a wash. Like I think his ring's probably great. I haven't played with it, and I'm only going off of kind of theory here.
It's fine, yeah. I got nothing against it, but his passive is it's either really good at the beginning of the game, or it's not really doing anything. In theory, if you could get, obviously, the idea being that if you can obviously get the first genetic marker, and then you can start picking up cards from the Talaxu row and putting them on top of your deck.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. But again, by that point, the opening card or two are probably already cycled, or they already weren't good to begin with, in which case you probably didn't pick him. So at that point, it's kind of guesswork, unless you go absolutely all in on research and you just rush it immediately. But then I don't know. It's fine, I guess, but it's nothing to write home about.
Yeah. All right, I have one more I want to throw in here as the somewhat most disappointing of these guys, and that's Miles Tegg. I know we've talked about him. We've seen him played. Poor Miles. One of the main characters in the 5th book, doesn't do very much. His limited prescience effect lets you look at the top of the Imperium duck at any time and acquire it as though it were in the Imperium row. This is a neat effect, but that's about it. Then hypermetabolism.
Hypermetabolism. Say it
a ring effect. Yeah. It makes me put the accent on a weird spot. You may trash a card in play to take another turn immediately after this one. Again, for me, this is a neat effect. I don't know how good these. I've seen them not be used very much at all, and that's I think the problem for me.
I believe I took on Miles, and I took him on specifically because I play Paul Atreides a lot, and I looked at them and I felt like seeing, obviously, this is kind of in the vein of Paul Atreides, especially with the prescience ability. And I think I noted at the time that these abilities, while they are cool, they are just way too niche to really ever get a ton of value out of. Being able to the top card of the deck, Enquirer, is not actually the worst. You effectively have a six card kind of field, and like, you know, that's kind of neat, I guess. Although I did find myself forgetting that I could acquire the top deck, not just looking at it. On Metabolism, though, it's like there aren't that many situations where it's you want to play two actions one after the other. There's very few, you know, unless you're going to like you know, like instead of shipping, then take Mentat, or if you need to get hold of Spice so that you can get to Highlander before someone else does, that sort of thing. But the problem is, there's so many ways to infiltrate spaces now that the ability, I think the power to take 2 turns back, unless you're going specifically for like High Council or Mentat, or for something really specific like a tech maybe. Other than that, it's just not really that advantageous. And you have to draw your ring, you have to play your ring, and then trash something in play, which odds are
is usually your ring.
It's going to be your ring. Yeah, exactly. So that is kind of the problem there. So they're nice abilities. I like the idea of limit prescience, but it's just they're too niche, and that was what I found. Especially again, having played a lot of Paul, I feel like was a decent authority on that. Nice ideas. I think they are cool, and in the right spots, those can be really, really good. But they're just so random and rare, and you have no control really. Like, you can't really set up for hypermetabolism realistically. Again, apart from some really hyper-specific spots, like you need to get the Highland before someone else does, and it's like round 7, and you need to win the combat sort of thing. Other than that, I don't think hypermetabolism is really going to be used, because again, you're basically only going to use it once, maybe twice. So you don't even get the benefit of trashing cards on the side, you know. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to get your Swordmaster and play a card that you don't want first, and then play your ring to trash that card, to then take another action that is
the only thing
that is of urgency, right? Which is it's so neat.
The only thing that could be of interest is maybe to actually at the very start of the game, using Miles to like in the first round, or maybe especially in the first round, like if there's some cards that you're after in the Imperium row, but you're not be first reveal, is deliberately playing your ring second, trashing like the dagger or whatever card you put the first round down, so you can reveal before everyone else does and take it to your actions. That's something you could definitely do with Miles, but again, it's really niche. And the thing is, you think what that first card's going to be, it's going to probably be like your Diplo. If it's your Seek Allies, you've got to lose your ring. Do you want to lose your ring immediately? That has decent access. You kind of don't want to, so it's really tricky. Again, there are
really good point.
There are situations where he can do really good stuff, but they're really, really hard to come by, and then it's still going to come at some cost. So that is the problem.
So thematically, Miles Teg is kind of like a mixture of Paul Atreides and Gurney Halleck-esque kind of characters, and in the books, and he's kind of more of a weapons master than this. Like, this doesn't really scream thematically Miles Teg from what I've read, and I also want to say that the limited prescience, and this is something that I am going to always say I don't like, is that looking at the top card of the Imperium deck, a deck that changes frequently, gets a little bit messy, and people will knock things over. We think about this in terms of like physical copies of this game, even though we're playing this digitally. Like, it's not a really great set of actions to have going on at your table. Like, okay, let me reach over and look at the top card. Okay, let me set it back down. And then it's like, oh, you got a new card. Okay, let me look at the top card of the deck.
Yeah,
it's like that starts to get a little bit too tedious, and then you're not playing the game. You're just playing the look at the top of the card game, top of the deck game, and I don't like that. And we were talking about this with regard to buffing Paul Atreides before, right? Like, what if he looked at the top of the Imperium deck? I mean, this kind of showed that it didn't really work for me in this form, and I don't think it would work for Paul. But I still think looking at the top card of the conflict deck is an interesting thing to do, because it only happens You could look at it at the beginning of the round, and then you that's it.
Yeah, exactly. It does. You don't have to keep doing it. Yeah, it's not slowing the game down at all, which is a good point. And again, obviously, a lot of our play is online, so we have a lot of convenience. But you do have to think a little bit about like if this was in a physical format. Yeah, like looking at the top of the Imperium row every single time would definitely slow the game down.
And that's actually something I am thinking about, because if I wanted to print these leaders off to actually use at with my friends at over the table, I would want them to be kind of thought through in that physical way. So it's a criticism that it's mild, but I definitely think that's something we should consider. Okay, does anyone have any other really mediocre leaders they want to talk about before we get to the best of the best?
Yeah, I mean there are a few leaders that we did get to, which I don't know if they're good or bad necessarily, but they do change how the game works very significantly. Which I think might be a decent way to fold on to. And what I do want to talk about is Serena Butler here, who brought up plenty of conversation in the game that we did play of her. So in theory, she's super simple.
Oh,
yeah. Anti-machine uprising at the start of the game. Deploy 9 troops from your spine to the conflict. So you win the first conflict, pretty much guaranteed. I don't see how you could possibly lose that, basically. And then you got Martyrdom, which is trashing 3 garrison troops, specifically for a wild double bump. This created a lot of issues in the game we played. This is the one I think I was playing as Feyd-Rautha behind Serena here.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of issues that this created, more than I think we realized at the start. We'll talk about Shaddam shortly, which we knew going in was going to have some fun. But yeah, Serena was really strange. So anti-machine uprising. So at the start of the game, every troop in her supply goes into the conflict immediately. Now there are some downsides. Obviously, it means you can't get any hold of any specimens in the Talaxu track, which, if you're not playing as Immortality, you don't care about because it doesn't matter. You can't get any negotiators, but it's basically not really relevant in the first turn almost ever. The problem is it means that she's guaranteed the first point, which kind of perverts the game a bit because she insta wins it. So if it's a victory point, she just gets a point for just choosing Serena Butler, which is not great. And it also means that basically, what is anyone's doing with all their troops? It kind of messes with the game a lot. The other issue as well, and I raised this at the time, is Martyrdom with the Rise of Victor expansion is completely busted and not workable, putting it politely. There is a reason that getting hold of a wild double bump, there are so few of them, and it's so hard to get them. Specifically, you've got Shifting Allegiances, which you have to drop an influence somewhere and pay spies, and you have to have the card. You've got Grand Vision, the combat at the end of the game. You have got Demand Respect, which you have to win a combat and then pay spies for. It's really hard to get it. And the reason it perverts is because, of course, if you have a wild double bump and it is completely unstoppable, no one can start playing your ring, what are you going to do? You're just going to put it down somewhere and take double bump with shipping on the Spacing Guild and just get instant access to shipping round 1. And no one can stop you. That is just... It doesn't work. It completely breaks the game. And it's just... It messes with everything way too much. If she was in the base game, I actually think it wouldn't be that bad, because obviously once you start trashing those troops, that's pretty bad, because again, the base game, there's a lot of points that are generated via conflict, because there isn't many to gain elsewhere, so conflict becomes pretty, a lot of effort gets sunk to that pretty late on, and that would impact that. But yeah, unfortunately, because instead of shipping exists, having martyrdom is just, it doesn't work. It cannot exist. You cannot have anyone have the ability to get effectively a free double bump first action when instead of shipping exists. And that's just that's heads and tails of it. I don't. There is nothing else to be said there. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, 100% agree. My big problem with this leader, besides the fact that it is busted, the effect is too strong, is that it funnels you into playing exactly the same way in every game.
Yeah.
And there's no wiggle room. You're going to be winning all of the alliances, or at least 3 out of 4 alliances, most likely. I think we saw in that game 3 out of 4 alliances were taken. by Serena, and the game was ended before we knew what was happening.
Yeah, round 6.
It was like a round 6 win.
Yeah, and the other issue is, of course, the problem you've got is that because she can martyrdom, she can basically martyrdom 2 factions, get their alliances of full persuasion almost immediately. And the problem is that means no one's ever going to challenge her, because you're going to get the friendship, but you're never ever going to realistically try and go for the alliance because you're so far behind. She can just defend, and that means she can just target the other 2 alliances. It's kind of like why people complain at the Baron in Rise of X, and it's like on steroids basically.
Right. Because you can do it multiple times. I mean, you can trash those 3 garrison troops multiple times.
Yeah, as long as you've got... you can do it 4 times in theory. You'll probably only do it twice, probably, but twice is enough. Secure 2 alliances super early. Get into shipping access immediately, potentially. And it's a coin flip. Like, it's random as well. You do nothing for it. And you don't care about losing those 3 garrison troops the first conflicts. They're not doing anything. And if you get instant access immediately, well, then you just ship your second action, and then the next round you ship again, and suddenly those troops are back in your garrison again, and it's just no good, unfortunately. I can't defend Serena, unfortunately.
Can't be defended. No, I think there's some. If you're playing in first position and you get Ring and Dune, I think it's over. You just go Ring to Smuggling and then Dune to Interstellar, and you have 6 Solari, so you're getting shipping and Swordmaster first. I think that's probably the main issue. One thing I will say is the idea of trashing troops, of actually getting rid of the troops, I actually kind of like that. I don't know why I never thought of that particular
it's an
design
interesting
space.
idea.
I'm sure you can do something with it, but
legitimately just taking them straight out the game is definitely different. But it's, I don't know. I mean, like in theory, it sounds pretty bad, but like I say you can pretty much trash 3,000 troops twice, and then you just don't really get involved in combats, because the problem is because you're ahead, you've got 2 alliances secured. It basically then forces everyone else to then dogpile each other into combat, because they can't get their points anywhere else, and you can just sit back on your 2 alliances and pick up points wherever you want, basically, and they just let everyone else kill each other, because they can't really go for your alliance because you just defend it, unless they've got like some crazy triple bump that they have secretly, but it's so unlikely they have that. And if they have something like shifting allegiances, well, you just go 1 more bump with the faction, and that's it. They can never touch it.
Yeah, and as Holyboss was just saying, like getting round 1 access to Interstellar means you're effectively getting 3 bumps by round 2, which is kind of crazy.
And the thing is, because you're getting it immediately, like no one is going to cut you off for at least probably another couple of rounds, unless the whole rest of the table specifically colludes to let the person to your right get into the shipping, which
you have to, right?
Which you have to, but that should never be the case. It's just at that point, like you've clearly it's all gone wrong.
All right. Let's do the next one. BlackShadow, you want to pick the next one?
Well, I mean, we've done her, so I think we should probably talk about Shaddam the Fourth. And we're on the theme of leaders who completely change how the game works. So Shaddam is designed specifically to change the whole game, being that he's the Emperor. His declining of Emperor ability means that at the start of the game, he gains 4 influence with every single faction. He doesn't start with it, he gains it. So he still gets the bonuses for getting the alliances as well. So he gets the money from shipping, he gets the water from the Fremen. So at the start of the game, he has access to every single space immediately, which is, it's pretty good. But the caveat is that every time he would increase in influence of a faction, he just reduces it instead. And he also cannot trigger the end game, because of course he starts the game at 8 victory points effectively. Which is, obviously in theory he could just end the game in 2 rounds, potentially, depending on how it goes. His ring ability is trash 3 intrigues and get a victory point. Doesn't matter what they are, you just do them. Now, I believe it was CJ, you played as him, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I like the idea of playing with this very highly asymmetric leader that plays completely differently. I did win that game, I remember, and I didn't even feel like I deserved to win that game. Basically what I ended up doing is not hitting any of the factions at all, unless I absolutely needed to, for like a resource. And I just bought Spice Must Flows and, went for... So basically what you're doing is you're playing a completely different game than everybody else. Yeah. You're not going to factions, so there's not as much competition, which is good for everyone else, except then it kind of has the 3-player problem. In 3-player games, you usually get one person with 2 alliances, sometimes 3, and then that's a problem. There's a bit of an imbalance there. And then you're just cluttering up the rest of the board with your guys, like Dune and the cities
Carthag,
and Carthag. Yeah, you're just hammering Carthag as much as possible. You're shipping as much as possible.
Which you can do immediately.
Which you can do immediately. Round 1 shipping is a broken thing. It should not exist.
Yeah, it should be noted. Yeah, Shaddam can get Swordmaster round 1. And
he can get Swordmaster round 1.
It is unstoppable. Unless he doesn't draw access, he gets the free Solari from the spacing friendship. So you just ship, you take 5 Solari, you get Swordmaster.
And you get your Swordmaster, and you're good to go.
Immediate Swordmaster, and it's just such ridiculous action coming in here. And the other thing that as well, like the Declining Empire, like in theory, every time you would increase the influence of a faction, you'd reduce it, which obviously sounds really bad. And the idea is it kind of also with Ix kind of keeps you away from going for the second. Going for the tier 2 shipping, but tier 1 shipping is good enough, and also denying it. But the problem is obviously even if you don't hit any factions or if someone's taken alliance, they still have to do an extra bump as well. And people forgot about that as well. Like if I want to take your space alliance, I have to go to 5 bumps, not 4 to get that second point. So while it's denying you the point, it's taking even more effort into a faction which I don't really want to get involved in, but we have no choice. So it's we had heard from a few people that thought that Shaddam was pretty strong. And of course, what you did, you just sat on your endgame intrigues and just no one could touch you.
No one could touch me. I think I had like 3 points.
And the thing is, I knew, and I think I won the combat, and it was like, I was gonna I had the choice to end the game, but knowing you had several victory points in hand, but it was just like you were so far ahead. It was like, what's even, it was a pretty sad situation because we knew you had like I think it was. Corner of the market, I think it was. And it was
corner of the market.
It was obvious you had corner of the market, but it's just like you're like 4 or 5 points ahead of us basically. Like what can we ever do? So it wasn't a very fun experience to be on the side of that, and it didn't seem like a particularly fun experience for you either, because you're not engaged.
It was very.
You're not doing
autopilot-y. Yeah.
You're just doing the same things. No one can stop you because you have immediate access to everywhere. You get immediate Swordmaster, which means you're going last into every single combat, which means people have got to commit more because they don't know if you're going to get involved. It's just there's a whole, it's just a snowball effect really, and it's kind of brutal. And hopefully if Shaddam just decides he's just going to sit on his laurels and just buy Spencer's flows and find like an endgame victory point somewhere, I mean, there's not really a lot you can do about it. So in that effect, it's not good. But it's just the interactivity as well. It didn't work. And of course, the other issue as well is, all right, you can't trigger the end game, but if you've got Emperor Shaddam sitting there with like 12 or 13 points, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't trigger the end game, but he's going to win.
You're still going to win. Yeah.
Right. So then you've got the issue where you've got other players are playing the game, basically knowing, and it's in front of them that they can't win because it's so impossible for them to get there. Like the maths doesn't make sense. So what do? Do they end the game knowing that they can't win, or do they deliberately stop taking points to try and get a bundle of them late? It's just a horrible situation. It didn't.
I also want to point out is if a point combat comes up, he starts with 2 extra troops as well, so he has 5 troops in garrison.
Because of the Emperor.
So you could, if you needed to, hit Carthag. If you somehow hit Sleeper Must Awaken and then just threw all your troops into combat 1 for a point, you could win the game round 2. It's really stupid.
Well, you can't trigger the end game, but we know what you mean.
I mean, you could get to 10 points round 2. What are people going to do? I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know. You can't trigger the end game. I mean, the idea of not being able to end the game is cool, but it also makes the game drag out a little bit longer as a foregone conclusion. So
which is never a good place. It's the last. You do not want people in situations where they're just playing a game out for the sake of it. It's the worst feeling. And it's something that should be avoided at absolute costs. And unfortunately, that wasn't what we saw at all.
Yeah. Now, Holyboss, I know you played in the Conley where I did a similar kind of thing where everyone started with 4 points, all of the friendships, but didn't get. There just weren't any points there. You just started with extra points, and then you couldn't. There were only alliances to take, and so it was a very similar effect where. Everyone was trying to scrap for alliances, but that just it was a different kind of effect, right? Everyone could do their own thing, and the game they could still play the game. They weren't playing around some sort of I don't know, weird end game effect. I don't know. How did you feel about that versus this card?
To be honest, that was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember that game.
It's okay.
I remember that it was. I mean, it was equals, right? So there's if you do something crazy, if you're doing it crazy for everyone, then it's not really essentially an issue, right? It just makes you adapt. But I mean, this I won't say too much that you guys haven't said. I respect the attempt for like extreme asymmetry here. I totally love the go at it, but I think it's he went for it for sure. It's a tough tough thing to pull off. It's interesting.
The problem is as well, it's the value of any point that no one can take away from you is just so huge. Just like I say, he's just got to get expelled courtiers probably a couple of times, and he's probably won the game. And plus buying a couple of spiceless flows, like that's just 4 hard points that no one can take away from him. Like that's it's really brilliant. And again, it coupled the fact that he's got he can get sword master immediately, virtually every single game. He gets shipping access immediately. It's probably the irony is his best counter is Serena because obviously they're both just completely crazy. But that's not really a good situation to say. So I get the idea. I like the of having someone who's got like a huge advantage, but in theory gets weaker as the game goes on. But the problem is he just doesn't really get weaker, or if he does get weaker, the offset is basically irrelevant.
All right, Holyboss, what do you think is the next best leader, the top of the best? That
okay, we're going to the top of the top now.
Yeah. Well, Shaddam and Serena are kind of, they're pretty good.
Special case.
Busted.
They completely pervert the king, which is why I want to bring them up.
Let's see the strongest ones that I've noticed. This is a good one because it's almost unassuming. I think Vorian Atreides is busted. Probably one of the more unassuming, right? And it's kind of in 3 pieces. So starting with 7 cards in your hand is crazy. Like I think crazier than most people might think. Because obviously you have a good chance to get a crazy card turn 1, but not just that. You're guaranteed to cycle 2 cards back into your hand for round 2. So not only you're gonna get a crazy card round 1, you have a pretty good likelihood to. Well, you're cycling your deck no matter what, but you have a pretty good likelihood that you're actually gonna pull it into your hand turn 2, and that's crazy. If I just off the bat, we're talking about rebalancing, I'd probably turn that to 6. And the two extra troops and garrison seems kind of small, maybe, but that's even. I mean, there's a pretty common case where usually around like 3 or around 4 garrisons are pretty emptied because people went after the first 2 combats, maybe the first 3, usually the first 2. And just those two troops oftentimes are going to mean you just go to city space and throw 3 in and grab a free or a relatively free combat. So I think that's big as well. And then you talk about his ring, which it costs a decent amount. I think a spice in a discard is definitely not nothing. But then getting your 3rd action is, I mean, we talk a lot about action compression or just number of actions. Just getting yourself an extra action, probably 4 times maybe on average.
Yeah, I mean it gets you like extra 8 extra actions and 7 extra actions. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a fair amount of combat space in the game. Not a ton, but there's a fair amount.
Yeah, what is there? 1, 2,
all the cities,
like
all
10?
the mining, your two Fremen and the Highlander, I guess. I think it definitely makes him able to. He's able to like really heavily chase after the Fremen because obviously you can put an agent down and then take it back from say like steel suits, and then hardy warriors, something like that. But obviously his idea is like he's meant to like obviously get the last say in combat, which makes him pretty dangerous. And being able to recall agent is pretty good. Yeah. The only issue is obviously he's having to discard a card. So you're basically having to, in a sense, almost pay 2 cards to recall the agent. Obviously, you're ring while you're doing something. You have to discard something, so you've got to be a bit careful. It means it's kind of hard for him to buy Spicemas flows. I don't think he's overly strong. I think he's fine enough. Like there are times where Savfk can get kind of ridiculous, but I don't personally feel he's like overly crazy.
Just to clarify,
the cards in hand part is the most egregious. I think it's even more egregious than the ring.
Cards in his hand at the start of the game is very egregious. I mean, it's only the first time.
But you can't. You think of it on top of it as well. You almost can't have a bad hand. trying to think.
Yeah.
The likelihood of you not having Diplos or not having yellows, which I think are the most important parts.
He's gonna have
It's like zero.
like wherever he is on the board. Like he's, I mean, fun if it's not too far from. I said at the time it wasn't far from like one of the suggestions CJ had for 4th place. You know, just let him draw a 6th card, to sort of that sort of thing. But it is definitely over there. Like it's pretty good. It means if there's like a 5, 6, or even a 7 value card on the round on the row, you can target that. Also, Survivor, if you can combine that with a couple of cards of unknown effects, that's crazy. I mean, that's the strength of Vorian Atreides. If you can pick up like In the Shadows or Boundless, or any
like Water
card,
Peddler, any of
or
them.
Water Peddler, yeah, especially Water Peddler, you can just basically hit Hardy Warriors infinitely. Yeah, that's the strength of him. Like being able to having a ring with a discard ability is innately really powerful because it lets these decent cards suddenly they get even stronger, and it's just the action compression is nuts. And it is notable that a lot of the things we're going to say later on, like, you know, it's why there's a tech that lets you discard a card just to draw a card, because obviously you compare it with unloading stuff.
Really
Can I step in here for just a second?
Yeah,
I just want to clarify because I don't think we fully explained what the ring does.
Oh,
I think we said it gives an extra action, but what it actually does is you pay a spice and discard a card to recall one of your agents from a combat space. So slightly different than just getting an extra action. It does do that. And you did mention the combat space, but I just wanted to clarify for the listeners out there.
And even if you're not just taking the agent off of like Carfag, I mean, it's not a big downside. And of course, if you've got another action, just go
do it again.
Just go to Carfag again. You know, go to Arakeen or something. You know, just cycle through your deck. There's a lot of cool things. You know, maybe hit a second mining spot to pick up some spare spice that someone else can claim. There's a lot of cool things you can do. And that's why I mentioned, I think that paired with the Fremen specifically is ultra dangerous. If you can pick up a couple of Fremen cards, you know, like, especially if Immortality, if you can get hold of Contamination, I mean, that's pretty absurd. Yeah, and that is potentially hugely strong. You just keep hitting these factions, and then he can obviously go to like let's get selective a lot more often as well. Not selective, research station, stuff like that. There's a lot of potential for him to roll really well, but you know, and the 7 card start is definitely really strong. But I don't think he's quite on the level as some of the other leaders that we encountered. But there's a lot of potential there. He's very unassuming. Like it doesn't look a lot on the card, but once you start getting into the meat of what he could do, there is a lot of cool stuff.
I think his ring is abusable. So I think that is something that should probably be looked at. I also agree with you, Holyboss, that 7 cards is one too many. I think if you start with 6 cards, that's still unique enough, and maybe just 1 extra troop, 4 troops, an extra card. That's good enough, man. That's a lot. Then we can work on fixing that ring a little bit. Like, I don't know, like it's a cool effect, but. And it's a couple turns. It's like 3 times you'll probably do it, right? It's like, it's not that bad.
When it high rolls, it's completely absurd. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and he's going to get it again because of the 7 extra cards. I mean, that's... So if you curb that a little bit, I think it's more reasonable. But this is, I think, yeah, he's close for me. I think he's a cool leader. It's a cool effect. I'd like to see it like tweaked back a little bit just to bring it in line with some of the other... more moderate leaders. All right. So we've talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leaders. That's pretty good. Let's move on to Duke Mutelli. So sorry, I want to do Duke Mutelli. Not because he's busted, but simply because I think he has a couple of things we've been talking about together as interesting effects, cool effects, and he shares some of the downsides of some of the other cards we've been talking about. So I'm taking a little detour here from the busted of the busted cards for Duke Mutelli. So this guy, his house Mutelli, he's a pampered consumer. It's kind of funny. His effect is anytime you visit a desert board space or a triangle board space, you may discard a card to draw a card before doing any other actions. And then his ring effect is Envied Riches, which is pay 2 spice, acquire a card that costs 5 or less to the top of your deck. Now, he has the same effect that the what is it? There's an intrigue card that does the exact same thing. Bypass Protocol. Bypass Protocol, which is the same thing, but it's only one of the parts of the card, the bottom part, which I think is an interesting effect. And this relates to that Feyd-Rautha discussion where his ring effect is just another card printed effect that we have from the game. So this one's very similar in that it's copying an effect elsewhere, but it also it could have been an effect that is super busted, and not because he puts cards on the top of the deck, but the discarding and drawing before doing any other actions. It had to be before doing any other actions, I think, because otherwise you can do crazy stuff with this effect.
I mean, it's not that you can't do crazy stuff, even do without it, but yeah, it could potentially be even more absurd. Yeah.
He actually changed it. He didn't have that specification before, and then people were just buying cards and cycling them into their hands immediately.
Which that's the power of him, is like, let's immediately buy a card. Oh, I went to a desert space. Well, I'll just draw that card.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
that's
he was
too good
when that was the case. I think he tuned it back a little bit. But.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is that I think that effect, if that wording wasn't there, this would be a broken leader. But he's not. He's in the middle of the road, I think, maybe lower end of the middle of the road. And I like this choice of the tuning before doing any other actions. It makes it feel like this has been play tested and tried, and that is to make sure things don't happen that shouldn't happen. On the other hand, I still think that having a ring effect that puts cards on top of your deck is cool, maybe a little bit too powerful sometimes, but still you can set it up and it can be really good. His cost of 2 spice is very high. It's very high. Even if the intrigue, it's very high. You don't see it that often. And as a repeatable effect, I don't know if there's enough spice for this leader to do the thing he wants to do enough. And I think he kind of gets choked on resources a little bit too much. So I don't know. What do you guys think about Mutelli?
I think the idea is that basically it's trying to encourage people to do shipping with him, which is obviously what you want to do with him. There's no reason not to ship with him a lot, and to take the spice more than the cash. I think is the idea. My only thing is, obviously, it's a 5 cost, though. You have to obviously bear in mind, especially with the expansions now, that the level of power of some of these 5 strength cards. There's a reason why people will build up 5 persuasion and then hit the atomics and just roll some dice, because like there are some 5 costers, even some 4 costers, which are just completely crazy. I mean, Duke Mutelli in theory could like pinch, could go like Arcane in theory. And like get hold of Web of Power and just draw it into his hand immediately, and just have like a passive pump steal lines. Is like there is, again, there's a lot of chance, and again it's pretty good. But yeah, being able to again discard and draw. I mean, even so, like it's just good for deck cycling. I mean, you just go shipping, you just play experimentation, you discard a dagger, and you just draw another card. You just see your cards again. You know, just passive deck cycling. It's really strong. So my only issue with Duke is like. It's nice, but it doesn't. I mean, it's kind of tricky. It doesn't feel particularly inspired, although I would argue that I guess there's only so many things that you can do in this game before you just start running out of ideas. That's why you do see some of the.
That's fair.
Some of the sort of weirder and lesser seen effects kind of getting incorporated into leaders. I think I'm okay with that. There's only so many different things you can do. I mean, to be fair, in a situation, I mean, you look at some of the leaders. Like in the French, and like they have so much tech, it's like someone's trying to rewrite the Bible. And the problem is once you've got that much text and the mechanics are that complicated, you can't lose the point. The idea of these is to be fairly short, fairly sharp, which I think is probably worth it. So while it's not the most exciting ability, like there is an inherent efficiency to it. It's pretty decent. Picking up some strong cards and then passively trying to see them sooner is definitely fine. And I guess I prefer it to some of these other ones, which are kind of ridiculous. And like you feel like you've got to sit there for 10 minutes reading the ability for it. At least you know what it's doing. So he's fine. He's not exciting, really. There are definitely much more exciting and dynamic leaders out on the boards that can be played with, and he isn't one of those. But I guess that's fine. Not everyone gets to be interesting.
That's true. And as I don't know the lore behind Mutelli. Actually, he's one of the. Same thing with Vorian. I mean, maybe I read about him. I don't remember. Or Mutelli. So I don't have much to add about that. But I'd say like there's a couple things regarding when for designers of these leaders is that You have to make sure that you get your templating close to right, or the words you're using close to right. So actions, before doing any other actions in this game, you take two different types of actions. You take a reveal turn when you play an agent, or you take an agent turn or a reveal turn. An action isn't really a term used in this game.
Yeah, that's true. You've got to be very specific language, otherwise you create loopholes, and then stuff starts getting abused pretty heavily. Which is, you know, it's not something like, it's not people doing it like out of malice or spite, but if you do leave these holes around, like people will, but especially with us, in this we play so many games. You have some of these completely crazy niche cases of where language doesn't quite and technically allows something, but it's, you know, these things will come up. So it's a tough business, getting to the minutiae of it, and it's something that I think only experience and time teaches you, I guess.
Right. So it should just be effects. Like the term that the rule book uses is effects. Like all of those are rewards. They're effects that you can do in any order you want. As it's easy to fix those things. And then same thing with Feyd-Rautha has a kind of templating thing. It's like when you may do a thing that's already a may effect. So it's kind of redundant. If you gain any points on your turn, you may do the thing. You know what I mean? It's like that's already a may effect, the arrow.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we have an arrow. Yeah, exactly. So
it's
useful resource.
A little redundant. Anyway, all right, moving on.
Oh, real quick, let me get a piece of this.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm shocked you guys don't think this is average or better than average. I think this.
I think it's better.
Crazy.
He's better than average. I just don't.
But you think he's crazy?
Oh, I think he's crazy for sure. The deck builders, the Felk devs, and the Drazos of the world are probably rolling over in their grave. You grab cards and then you see them probably twice as much as you normally would, right? Any Imperium row with a crazy card on it, like you're gonna see it literally at least twice more than most players would, unless you're like
the general just cycling of it to any triangle space, like that's really strong. Like I don't, it's not, but it's only as strong as you make use of it. That's the only thing, you know. Again, there's a reason that there's a tech that is literally you pay 3 spies, you know, and then there's a tech to discard to draw, you know.
And there's a tech that says put cards on top of your deck too, right? You get both of them.
Exactly. So you basically
and then you get to snatch the cards, literally, not just snatch them, but you get to throw them on top of your deck and likely draw on that same turn as well.
Out sequence as well. Like he's a lot more stronger than the sum of the parts. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I know he's pretty good, but that doesn't mean he's particularly. Like I don't think I'd go into a game where it's like, oh, I'm going to be able to play Duke Mutelli. Like it's not, to me, it's not very exciting, but he's pretty good at what he does.
Yeah. Okay. If he had a little bit more flash, maybe with the pampered customer effect, I could see him being, you know, one of these effects should be a little bit pushed. I think it's not. I think he's just very middle of the road to me. Yeah. But and in fact, didn't Drazo come in and play one of the rounds with us? He played Mutelli. I wasn't he trying to show us that he was really good, and it ended up not being very good. So I don't know.
Well, if you don't have crazy cards show up to snatch, then yeah, of course.
Exactly.
I think
there's some variance, of course, but
I think he did. I think he had some pretty good cards, and I think it just didn't work out. Like he got blocked on a lot of spice, and it doesn't do that much.
The thing is, if he's in the game and there's good cards out, like even if you can't stop him taking the cards, you stop him getting the spice in the first place, and. You know, and again, because of the power of experimentation, it's like, if it was Rise of X, it'd be a different story because people do not want to go to the spy spaces because Dune Desert Planet is a bad card. You know, which is why it builds up. So Duke Mutelli can take far more advantage of it, but because of Immortality, which we're playing as, Experimentation is a really decent card. People hit the spy spots way more than they used to, so you know, it's a lot harder for him to get hold of that spice. It's not going to build up. It's not going to let him ring up, and if the timing just doesn't quite work out, like it could get pretty tricky. So you know, and obviously as well, the thing is, obviously he can get hold of these big cards, but it still takes time to get these big cards online and get the most value out of them, and that can be pushed. People can like push to end the game really quickly, just go hard on spiceless flows and just try and outpace you. Like we see it with other things. So yeah, I say I accept it's good, but I don't know, it's a bit tricky. Anyways,
Holyboss, you want to do the next one?
I'll look at Princess Irulan, which I think she's interesting. I think she was the first one that I ever tried a long time ago when they created her. It's interesting. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think. So historian accounts at the end of a level 1 or level 2 conflict where you did not win, place the conflict card in your hand. In the following round, you may discard it to discount the cost of a space by the resources showing on the third place reward. And if not, you discard it. So most of the time, you're limping early game, and then you get to snatch them for, it's usually either one spice or 2 Solari, right? Which is really good. This is a free to ban tat, or it might get you over the threshold to get like an early selective breeding. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, CJ, but I don't know how else you could make a ability that captures some sort of historian or capturing the past type flavor, right? Other than like keeping track of a past combat, which I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think it is cool.
and then you have the usurp ring, where basically you pay 1 Solar to use the Asian box of any card in the Imperium row, which I think is crazy good. I think usurp is undervalued just because it's overcost.
Yeah.
The effect itself, I think, is actually crazy good. If you go through just random 5 cards over and over, you're gonna usually find at least one that's solid, and sometimes you find some broken ones. I mean, Gurney comes to mind, Jessica,
Power plays, stuff like that, anything like that.
Power
Although
Plays.
obviously,
Yeah, it means you have to trash your
it's not the
ring, but
same
yeah,
Irulan, of course, but yeah, it's similar idea. But yeah, for you, so Irulan was a strange. I think Lanny played Irulan in the
yeah, he
game that
did.
I remember
I was in
seeing.
that
So,
game.
and I remember commenting about Irulan. When I was going through the leaders and I saw Irulan, I knew she was going to be like at least really strong, if not kind of busted. But it's difficult though because I think the things she does are actually really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Haughty royalty, I think people's mileage will vary significantly about mimic style abilities, whether it's the Imperium row, or whether it's Scytale, I think it was, who can mimic other leaders' rings, sort of thing. I personally think that in most games there is a place for that sort of leader. Again, I talk about like Twilight Imperium 4, and you've got the the I never remember their name. There's a race of that. There's loads of games where there's something which has a mimic ability or something else. I mean, we've got it in this game already with Gold, obviously, who mimics the Eurasian box. And I
Right.
think Haunted Royalty, it's cool because I think it encourages diversity and it encourages players like kind of keep an eye on the row and kind of being able to think outside the box and develop unusual paths and getting hold of things they wouldn't expect. But I will say, like for 1 Solari, way too cheap. It's completely ridiculous. It's got to be, I think, at least 2, maybe even 3 Solari potentially. Maybe three's a bit much, but 1 Solari is way too cheap. But I think using the action of the row of a card in the row, I think is cool. I also don't think it's that abusable in that I think when in the game it was voiced well, you could potentially get that you could use the same card 2 or 3 times in the row, but I think if a card has got that much value in the row, I think someone's either going to buy it or with Immortality they're going to atomics it. I think is the thing. So I'm not.
Mm,
I think if it's like a firm grip, for example, like someone's going to buy that. I mean, most of the decent, there are not many cards which have a really decent agent action box, which someone's not going to buy very
Which aren't
quickly.
great. Yeah,
There's
well,
apart
there's
from like the
some though.
really expensive ones.
so yes, but it did happen in our game.
But it did happen in the game, which shows the other side of it. Let's say Haughty Royalty is definitely it's too cheap. There's no question about it. Historians Account is the other interesting one. I think Historians Accounts is a really cool idea, but it is probably too strong because it's just basically it's passive resource generation for virtually no cost.
Yep.
And there's a reason that like there are very few leaders. I mean, the only leader that technically can kind of make passive generation
Elisa.
is a laser
Yeah.
Kaz, and she has the quote downside unquote that she's at least got to put the card down prior and use it. And if you can't use it, you get nothing. But yeah, you just go in, you just limp a troop somewhere. There's a million places you can do that, and you just get the resource for free, and that just rockets up really quickly. But the problem with it is, I think it's a cool idea, but it's too strong. But I have no earthly idea how you could make this weak without it not doing what it does. So you're kind of forced to go down some sort of rework, I think. Ultimately, which I think is where it is. Like, I like the idea of historian accounts, but unfortunately, I think it is just too strong. It allows you to jump too many queues, and especially like mentats and maybe getting a sword master before you should do, or that one spice that could be the difference between a highliner and not a highliner, stuff like that, like round like the end of the turn 6 conflict sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Man.
it's tricky. Like, I like her. I think I like the ability she has, but they are probably from what we saw, they were too strong. Holy Roberts you could at least make more expensive. But then it's like, what do you do? Do you like make it that she can only use like maybe she has a token? So like if she uses a card on the Imperium row, she puts the token down, which means that if she has to use a different card next time she plays a ring, so you can't just spam the same ability. It's something that I don't think is too. I'm trying to think of things that you could do again, like in real life, which don't make it too complicated. I think something like that would not be too. Just a token. You say, right, I'm going to play on. I'm going to use this card's ability. You put the token down the row, and that means the next time you use a ring, if your token's still on that card, you can't touch it. You have to do something else. I think that might be not a bad balance.
It's quite hard to put that in text, though, right?
It's extremely hard to put this in text.
But that's the best I can think of. So it's kind of.
So what I would say is, first of all, I think that the ring effect is way too good.
Yeah.
It's with atomics, it's even better because you can fish for an effect you want, and then it becomes like, what if you graft Gola to your ring?
Yeah, it
what?
Does encourage just fishing, and sometimes you just get lucky. Like, sometimes someone like just buys a card, like reveals earlier than you was expecting, and just peels a card off for you. It definitely encourages going mentat a lot with Irulan. So if it's a rubbish row, pay mentat, make sure you're last to act, and keep your ring in hand, so someone peels off some good cards for you. It definitely encourages that. There's no question about it. It's strong. Like, it is way too strong as it is. I'm not going to debate that it isn't, but I just think the ability to use the agent actions of the Imperial, I think is. I like that too much to want to get rid of it. So you have to find a way to make it more expensive. I don't know. Maybe make it a spice, perhaps. Maybe that's a better way of doing it.
Maybe.
Maybe make it like a spice and a discard or something. There are ways of doing it. I wouldn't want to lose that. I think it's cool, but trying to find the right sort of price is a tricky task. But I think it should be preserved if possible.
Maybe you trash an intrigue, and pay something. Like the idea of being haughty royalty is you're being very public. You're getting rid of intrigue. You're getting rid of that sort of secrecy, I guess. I don't know. Just thematically weird. But historian accounts is one of the coolest thematic effects, I think, besides maybe, Shaddam's, I think, is thematically cool.
Yeah.
Irulan's is awesome in terms of what it's trying to tell, the story it's trying to tell. And I think that is really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's the implementation of the card, the use of the card is as a discount is kind of a problem for me. My initial thoughts are to use the ring to trigger the card effects. Something like that. But like, I'm not sure how that would work. I guess you collect these things and then you can discard them with your ring to gain an effect. You can discard 2 of them to gain the second place effect or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but based on the design of the original leaders, if you look at all the original leaders, they kind of have like a couple things going for them. Either they have a one-time effect and a very a one-time strong effect or something like that, and then a kind of good middle of the road kind of effect, or they have something that is very powerful that happens only a couple times. So like final delivery for Una Moritani, very strong, costs a lot, and gets you a bump, which is I think why it costs so much, right? The troop and the spice is irrelevant to this situation, but her smuggling operation feeds into the ring, right? Memnon, kind of the same kind of thing if you had to change the spice into Solari. Ariana, more or less the same kind of thing, right? Her ring feeds into her spice addict effect. Like that's kind of where we're going here. And like I like that idea as long as they're not like on rails. So this is too disconnected for me, where the ring effect is just very, very good, and the historian's account is just very, very good, and they don't really speak to each other in any way. That's my problem with it. I like the idea. I'm not sure how to marry those two ideas together yet.
Yeah, I think in theory, historians' accounts could be used to pay for haughty royalty, but I don't think in practice you're really ever going to do that because it's only one Solari. Again, if it was like 2 Solari or 1 spice, maybe a bit of a different story. You might see that more, using historian to pay for royalty, perhaps. But yeah, the problem is royalty is just so cheap for what it does. It kind of, like, nothing else really matters at that point, and it will just kind of starts to break, so... it's tricky, but no, she was very, very effective for sure. I think going in, I knew she'd be really strong, and that's exactly what she proved to be.
Yeah. One thing I will say, and then we haven't maybe touched on this a little bit, is if you're playing these leaders, you're playing to have fun, right? And I think this is literally one of the funnest leaders to play. 100%. There's so many routes to like. I wouldn't say abuse, but there's way more variables that you get to play with here that are just it's just fun.
So dynamic. There's so many different things that you could look to do. Probably too many things in a way because of the power that's offered. But that's the thing I don't want to compromise. I think some of them like just offer you unique routes, and are just really fun to explore. And it just happens to Irulan, those new routes are also really strong as well. As a bonus, but yeah, no, she's definitely to play as. She's really entertaining, a lot of joy. Just feels really good, but yeah, it's just too strong at the moment.
If maybe Haughty Royalty used the conflict cards you got, so you had the choice between using them to discount a space, which I think is still good, or to do some other effect, which kind of like change the way your attention is focused on this leader, because you kind of like do the one thing early, the other thing late game, that kind of thing. That might work, or I don't know. I think there's a way to do it, and I'd like to brainstorm about this leader a little bit, but at another time. I think there's just too many other things we got to get to today. But again, I think this is thematically one of the most interesting passive effects and that have been created, and a lot of kudos to the designer for that.
Yeah.
So. All right, let's move on. I'm going to choose the next one. I'm going to choose Esmar Tuek here. I think this is actually a very, very strong leader. Maybe not broken, because I think we were talking about these leaders having like either very strong, both effects being very strong, or both effects being kind of weak. So Esmar Tuek has Underworld Connections as passive. Your agents do not block enemy agents. And then his ring is called Den of Thieves. Whenever you gain Spice, Solari, or Water this turn, increase the amount gained by 2. So I think this is like almost the opposite side of things, where things have been pushed too far in one direction and then pushed too far in the other direction.
This is 100%. We talk about balancing a lot, and it's a word that comes up a lot in the games you play about. Is this balance? Is that balance? There are some leaders and things where it's like what it does is like okay, but it's overly strong. And even some leaders that like they'll have like a decent buff, like obviously Yuna, for example, where like she can gain extra Solari, but she loses the water to begin with, that sort of thing.
Right.
Esmar Tuek is somewhere where his Den of Thieves ability is absolutely ridiculous, but his Underworld Connections is utterly ridiculous in the other way, and it's like it feels like it's both extremes have been smashed against each other to try and make them meet in the middle somewhere, is the impression I get.
Yeah.
When we had the game, we played Esmar, because also the thing with Underworld specifically is that it does change the game a bit for a lot of people, and specifically whoever's obviously on Esmar Tuek's left, who in that game was me.
Yes.
And the thing is that the problem is with a being like this, you don't block any agents. Obviously, that's good for everyone, and I kind of like the idea of having leaders that actually have like a debuff in there, because again, Yuna is basically the only one that has that. A laser technically kind of does, I guess. Not
Yeah,
really
I'd say so.
You know, and I've got no issues with having leaders that have like, you know, it's a passive, but it's actually a negative passive. I think that's cool. But the problem is with Underworld is that it affects the person on your left way more
Disproportionately.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
completely disproportionate, right? Because of course the problem is that if you decide to ship, which you're going to do, well, guess what? The person on your left is also going to ship, and there's nothing that can be stopped there. And it's not even just shipping as well. Like in that early game, because I was playing as whoever it was. And like it was a good 2 or 3 times in that game where I was fairly sure you were going to do a specific type of move, but of course I didn't care because
You didn't
I knew I
care,
could just
yeah.
I've automatic infiltration on you, and I didn't even ship that game. Like I knew the thing I was meant to do because you went shipping early was for me to just go shipping immediately as well and just jam it too. But I didn't even bother really, because it just seemed so obvious. But yeah, having a bit like this, it affects disproportionately between the leaders. I mean, it's probably not the right way to go about it. Obviously, you're always going to affect the person on your left more than the person on your right, but this is a complete extreme of it.
Yeah.
You know, and especially if you're playing with Rise of X and how instant shipping works, this is like this is basically like a semi-passive extra for them on the side with whoever they've got, and that's kind of ridiculous, really.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so I will always advocate for more and not less interaction in terms of design. I think that games and specifically this game benefit from more interaction. Not every game has to be interactive, you know, but this is a game where we interact with other players. Naturally, we are blocking spaces, which is part of the strategy of the game. Which space do you block for your opponents? This leader takes away that agency. I mean, your agents have no agency. They just go someplace. You're still blocked, which sucks, but the person to your left is not. And so you're like, well, I can't affect them. So you're just having a little bit less fun in a way. And so I think that that's just too harsh. It's a too harsh of an effect.
And it's very important, I think, especially at higher level play, of like if you're in a strong position, the person on the left kind of has to take a more active. The person on your right needs to make a more active role of policing you, because they are the people that can block you the most effectively. And when they don't do that or are unable to do that, that's how these runaway leaders get like even stronger and just completely crush a game. You know, if people get in front, they have to be stopped. Well, unfortunately, Esmar Tuek is not stopping anyone from doing anything.
Yeah.
So he is basically, if someone just runs away with the game, Esmar Tuek can do nothing about it. Basically, like what's he going to do? How's he going to stop them? He can't even go highliner and try and win a combat because you don't even block highliner, like in the late tiers, and that is something that you noticed as well, didn't you? And that was a real problem.
It was a bit of a bummer. Yeah. So, I mean. Yeah, the other side of the coin here is that the Den of Thieves effect is essentially Yuna's passive on a ring, but it's one more, and it's for everything. So
it should not be
what?
ignored. Like going to Siege Tiber with that ring is
for 3 water.
3 water is, especially in Immortality, is completely freaking absurd. But
it's insane. Yeah, and it was insane the game I played. I don't know if I won that game with Esmar. I think I was. I think I did.
You nearly did. I was playing
I was very
ring,
close.
and I should have won it like in 6 rounds, and I had the mother of all stall outs.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That was a good game. Yeah. So he also has a path to Swordmaster round 2, which I think is fine. But shipping, like in the second space for him, like smuggling, you get 3 Solari. Like, what? If you happen to ship down with him, with a smuggling, you're gonna get
that's 8 Solari.
8 Solari with 1 action. That's not fair. Also, he can just get every tech.
Because you get it's whenever you gain the Solari, so you get both.
Yeah, it's 3 + 7, it's 10.
You get 3 + 7, you get 10 cash.
Oh my god,
which is pretty good.
That's decent.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty good. Anyway, that's just way too pushed. Like I think the idea of getting 1 more of a thing is fine. Like whenever you gain spice this turn, increase the amount gained by 1. That's fine. I mean, if you just want to like copy paste Yuna's passive and put it on his passive and then start there, I think that's okay. But then now we have to rebalance that a little bit, you know.
if I had to speculate, I get the impression with Esmar Tuek is that and this is pure speculation, I have no idea. I feel like the designer wanted to have the don't block effect specifically, and then tried to design a ring that balanced it. If that makes sense.
Oh, you think he did the other way around? Yeah, I agree.
So. It feels to me like Den of Thieves was kind of like made that was made after, though they really want to get underworlding. So they thought it was a really cool idea, which it kind of is a cool idea. But the problem is it's such a negative debuff weirdly that they made this like really strong ring weirdly, and we're like, well, if you've got really bad and really good, like that's balanced, right? And that's the impression I get. Pure rampant speculation, but that's kind of how it felt to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys. I think I like the idea of having a negative effect somewhere, and then you just balance it with a great effect to kind of even things out. But specifically because this helps one player out of the table more than others, I don't see a way to really pull it off. And then the ring. There's just so many outs with this ring. Obviously, 10 Solari for grappling smuggling, a bit busted there. Even just going hog a turn 1 for 4 spice. If you get in on one of the turn 1, if you get on the turn 1 that has another spice or 2, you can get 5 or 6 spice by the end of turn 1. That's crazy. You just grab Holtzman or Shuttle Fleet, and you're good to go.
your banner is another source of Solari or spice, and so if you own that too, you also get extra stuff from that +2. It's like, what?
Yeah,
that's so crazy.
It's crazy. Obviously, 3 water is nuts too. He just kind of sets you up for the next 2 or 3 rounds. But oh, so kid.
No worries. So anyway, that's all I have to say about Esmar. I think he just needs to be completely redesigned. I like the idea of increasing the amount gained. I don't know if the ring's the correct way to do that. I think it doesn't really say smuggler to me. Like, if we're gonna go with like what Esmar Tuek's supposed to be, he's supposed to be working with the Fremen as a liaison between the Fremen and the Spacing Guild, kind of. So like there's a lot going on there that hasn't really been explored, and I think that could be brought to bear on this card a little bit more.
I think the ring, it just feels a bit clumsy, doesn't it?
It does.
That's not me being harsh. That's kind of the best way. It just feels like a bit of a clumsy way. Like it would be a lot more refined and a bit prettier than what it is.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I mean, we're not trying to be harsh on these guys. I think that they're all very well.
Yeah. We need to deliver critique. And some might be better than others. We've got to call it as we see it. So it's fine. But I think rather than trying to adjust its values, I think probably there must be a more fresher idea that can probably be implemented. That'd be like, oh, that's pretty neat, and then use Esmar for it.
Honestly, I don't hate. I think I'm a little less. I think +2 is just one too many. I think if you put +1 on any of these, and remember, it's only a ring, right? It's not like you're just getting it every time you do it. Anytime you get that.
+1, then it's like the issue is it's not just the ring. It's the fact that Underworld affects whoever's to your left way more than it affects
that's problematic. I'm with you there for sure.
That's the problem, I think.
Again. I think if you just made it gained 1 with the ring, it'd be fine. And then we'd need to rebalance that passive effect so that it made more sense, I think. And but I don't mind the +1 for a ring. I think that's a totally fine effect. Like, his ring's strong, cool.
Yep.
Like, it happens 3 times a game, cool. Now we need something else that kind of like works with that a little bit. So, and I don't know if it was going to be like a trading effect or swapping resources around or something else, like something that makes him exciting. I would totally be on board, and he'd be probably one of my favorites. So
there's got to be a more dynamic solution to it rather than just get an extra one.
Yeah, I think there's another Esmar or 2 that's in French that has some of that stuff that you're talking about trading resources or something. So maybe there's something in there to pick from. But
thank you all for listening to our Homebrew Leader episode. We'll be back with part 2 soon. We're not done talking about all of these leaders. There's more to go. So stick around, give us a thumbs up, like and subscribe. Tell us about how you feel about these leaders, if you've tried them, if you've looked at them, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.